It is 8 years to the day since this moment.
We are the champions, my friends. We are world champions, world champions. Woo!
All these years on, how do you feel about your Freddie Mercury impression?
Well, I should be embarrassed because that was horrific, but I'm not at all. I'm so not embarrassed.
What's it like listening back to it?
It feels like yesterday. You know, it's crazy that it's 8 years ago. You know, but that was the best moment of my life. You know, winning the world championship.
You've wrapped things up in Brazil. But the thing about it is, Jenson, is the way that it happened after so many years in F1 with cars that perhaps didn't do you justice. And then after Honda pulling out of the sport that winter, the team nearly collapsing, Ross Brawn rescuing it. You raced a car almost entirely devoid of sponsors because you didn't have a hope. It was like the Leicester City of F1.
Yeah, but it was. It was a crazy time. You know, everyone at the team thought they were going to lose their jobs at the end of 2008. And then in 2009, we won the World Championship. So a very special year. And to do it in that way, I think was great for the team. It was a tough year, you know, because we didn't have the funds to keep developing the car and to keep up with the likes of Red Bull. It was difficult. So it was such an emotional roller coaster through 2009.
And funny, you mentioned there everybody else worrying about losing their jobs. How much do you think about that as a driver, about everybody else on the team and their futures?
Yeah, of course I did. You know, from a selfish point of view, I wanted to be racing in Formula One, but several hundred people would have lost their jobs if we didn't go racing. So that was also a big talking point with Ross Brawn, because I had a contract for that year to be on a certain amount of money, and he said to me, well, if you want that money, we won't be able to go racing, and we won't be able to pay the staff. So okay, I'll take a cut, a very big one, but it was obviously 100% worth it, you know. And
how big's a big one?
it was big, but it doesn't matter. You know, the important thing is we won the world championship together, and that's what I arrived in Formula One to do.
Money can't buy that.
No, exactly.
Although some people might say money can buy that.
Yeah, it can, but yeah.
Can't buy that feeling, that sense of achievement.
Emotion,
Absolutely. There's a lovely section where you talk about the moment that you saw your dad after you climbed out of the car in Brazil as world champion, and he was crying and they were filming, and you knew he wouldn't want pictures of him crying to go out, so you kind of tried to shield him. Do you talk to me about that?
Of course, I remember. That's one of the moments that I'll never forget. I remember every second of jumping out the car and looking for him. When I eventually got hold of him and hugged him, I could feel that, you know, I could feel he was very emotional. Obviously, I was as well. But you can feel when someone's crying, intensely. And so I just kept holding him because I knew he wouldn't want to be seen on camera crying his eyes out. But it's a moment that'll always stay with me. You know, everyone says race wins are high adrenaline, and they are. They're such a special moment. But winning the world championship, it's more of a relief than anything else. You've achieved it, and you've held on, and you've won that world championship, and that's the thing that sticks with you forever. That world championship. Every morning I wake up, it's like, oh yeah, I'm a world champion. That's pretty awesome. And you know, when you have a bad day, you know, which we all have, that's what I think about. It's that emotion of crossing the line and, you know, embracing my father and thinking about all the great times that we had together.
Do you still wake up 8 years later going, hey, I'm a world champion?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. After I fed the dogs. So today is a really special day because it's 8 years since I won the world championship. It's the start of my book tour, if you like, and it's also Storm, my dog's first birthday.
Wow.
I mean, this is the day.
What are you going to do if you're not at home? Storm, I take it, is in LA.
Yeah, she's with Brit. So Brit's having a doggy party and she's got her cake.
You're going to
This is my life.
FaceTime? You're going to make sure you're there for the blowing out of the candles,
Yeah,
at least, on
so
FaceTime.
This is my life. I'm, 17 years Formula One driver. Now I talk about dogs' birthdays. I love it. You know, I mean, I've definitely done my time in F1, and I deserve to have this stupid life of talking about dogs' birthdays.
15 years and 3 weeks at home. That's what you write in the book. That's how long you actually spent at home until you retired.
Yeah, it's not a lot, is it?
It's absolutely nothing. There are few careers actually which will be so demanding. How is it adjusting to that?
It's been very easy, very easy. But it's. I haven't just been sitting at home doing nothing. You know, I set about racing in the World Championship in triathlon this year, so I've actually been more intense. My training's been a lot more intense than previously, but I'm at home most of the time. So I'll wake up at 6 a.m, I'll do a 3-hour bike ride, chill out at home, and then train in the afternoon as well. So, but it's been very intense. So I've not been sat around doing nothing. The last couple of weeks I have, and it's been really nice. Obviously, I had the sort of 5 months of writing the book, which was the most emotional 5 months of my life, in mostly in good ways. You know, there's so many highs in my career that you don't really enjoy them, and you don't look back on them because you're really living in the moment. And then as soon as that emotion's over, you move on because it's the next race. Whereas this year, I've had more time to really relax and look at my career as a whole and think about all those good times and also the bad times. And as you mentioned, my dad, you know.
Your father's front and centre
Yeah.
of this book, as he should be, because he's always been front and centre of your life, and you dedicate the book to him. I'm going to read it. It says, "For the old boy. Simply put, I couldn't have done any of it without you, not just because you're my dad, who I love dearly, but also because you were my best friend, my confidant, and my inspiration then, now, and forever. Together, every step of the way, we made our dream a reality. I love you, and I miss you."
I'm glad you read that. Yeah.
It's, you know, you can see just the level of esteem in which you held him. Did he know how much you loved him?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, when you're that close to someone, as most people know, when you're close to a family member or even a friend or whatever, a loved one, you don't always get on. So there are little things that annoy you, and we both had them about each other. We used to argue a lot, but it was silly little things. We'd never had a full-blown argument, but he was there through it all. Yeah, from karting, first day when I jumped in a kart, to winning the World Championship. So, you know, so many special memories for him, and that's a big part of the book as well. You know, as you said, it's not just about my Formula One career. It's about that father-son relationship that's big in a lot of our lives. So that's what makes it very interesting, the book.
He was a proper East End lad.
He was, yeah.
Dad. Car dealerships, managing bands, rallycross career. And, you know, there's a couple of photographs of him in here. As you describe him, he's gone full John Rambo in one of them. He's there in a black vest when you were karting in the early years.
With a cigarette in his hand.
Yes, absolutely. Fully unreconstructed. It's fantastic. But just talk to me a little bit about that relationship and how he spurred you on, because there have been moments where you felt like, well, when you won, actually, not long after you won in Brazil, you confronted him about overhearing him one day, coming back from a karting championship. Yep. And what was that? What did you hear him saying that day, all those years before?
It was, it's difficult to remember the actual year, but I remember exactly what he said. We had a little transit van, so he was sat in the front with my stepmom at the time, and I was lying in the back. He thought I was asleep. And he turned to her. We'd had a bad weekend. We'd been racing up in Scotland, so it was like a 6-hour drive home to Somerset. And had a really bad weekend. Finished right near the back. And he said to her, "You know what? I don't think he's got it." And it was like, oh, you know, I heard it as a kid, and I never said anything. It just spurred me on to be more competitive. And the reason for it was that I was just becoming a teenager, and other things in my life were just as interesting as karting. So it was, I wasn't as serious as I should have been. And I didn't remind him of it until after I won the World Championship. And he was gutted when I told him. But I put a positive spin on it and said that it actually helped me achieve. And that's why we're stood here today as world champions.
I don't want to dwell too much on what happened 4 years ago, because it's terribly painful, but it was an awful accident, it seems like. What happened to your dad? Just talk us through briefly what happened, how you found out.
I actually found out from my manager, who's one of my best buddies as well, Richard Goddard, the God, as we call him. We've worked together since 2004, so he's one of my best friends, and he was very close to Dad, and that's actually how I met him. I was away training in California, of all places, where I am now, and I got a call, or my friend got a call that was there with me from Richard, and basically Richard had found him. You'll have to read the book to actually get the full details, because I can't say it here right now.
That's okay, I totally understand. Even 4 years on, though, you
Yeah.
don't even want to think about him in that
Yeah, the
position.
strangest thing is when you're in a sport like Formula One, you're so used to hearing news, and it's right here, it's right now, and it's not like when I heard the news that he'd passed away, it wasn't shock. I didn't get shock. It's like a road accident. People get a lot of shock because it's something they're not used to. I'm used to hearing news and reacting to it immediately. So it wasn't a shock, but it obviously hurt like hell from the word go. But that feeling hasn't changed over the last 3 years, which is very strange. A lot of my friends said you haven't spent enough time thinking about your loss, and I hadn't, but this year I have. But still, the feeling's exactly the same. It feels, I walk down the street and I see someone in a pink shirt, and for a split second, you think it's that loved one that you've lost. So,
Do you think you have grieved properly?
that's exactly what my friends say, that I haven't. But I think we all go about it in our different ways, and I'll never get over that. It's as people say, when you do lose someone, you never fully get over it. You just learn to live with it. And it made racing in Formula One very hollow after that. There was definitely something missing the last 3 years in F1, and I tried my hardest to keep racing and keep enjoying it, but by the last year of F1, I didn't want to be there anymore. But I kept pushing, because people always say you should race until your heart's not in it, and then race for one more year, just to make sure that it's what you want to do before you move on, because you never want that feeling when you retire to think, I want to go racing against it Formula One, because it's too late, it's done. So I didn't want to make that mistake, and I'm here now, and I can talk about him as someone that's really made a big difference in my life, and I'm very lucky, and I know exactly the father that I want to be when I am a dad.
Are you looking forward to that? Not just a dad to your doggies?
Yeah, exactly, not just to my fur balls, but I'm at a point in my life where I still feel very young. I'm 37. My girlfriend does remind me that I'm not young, jokingly. But no, definitely, I definitely want to have kids. Would I push them into motorsport? No, because I know the dedication that's needed. And I also know that it's a small percentage of people that do actually make it in this sport. But I would definitely not say no to them if they asked if they could have a go-kart.
When you were signed for Williams for your first big contract, it's a fascinating part in the book, because I'm with you all the way, and the tension's there, and you're like, who are they going to go for? And then the final second they choose you, and you're quite surprised. But the whole thing is slightly upended by Ralph Schumacher's reaction.
Yeah.
So what happens with that? You've just found out that you've been signed for Williams, and what happens?
Back then, Formula One drivers were proper divas. It's hilarious, and it's changed a lot over the years. But so I got called into Frank's office, and this was the day of the launch of the new car and the launch of their two drivers. Nobody knew who the driver was going to be alongside Ralph Schumacher, apart from Frank, because he was the one making the decision. So it was half an hour before it's launched to the world, and he calls me in his office and he says, "Jenson, we've decided to go for you to race alongside Ralph Schumacher." And obviously it's like, wow, thank you, Frank. I'm 19 years old. This is a dream come true. And I'm just about to say goodbye to Frank and run out and see the old boys outside, and Ralph walks in. Doesn't look very happy. And he walks up to Frank and said, "Frank, if the car isn't there tomorrow for me outside the hotel," because he had a limousine or a chauffeur-driven car for him, he said, "if it's not there on time tomorrow, I'm not coming in." It was 10 minutes late today. I was like, wow. Yeah, I was like, you can't speak to Frank like that. And Frank just nodded his head, said, okay, Ralph. And he looked at me frank and gave me a little smile. I was like, okay, excellent. I can't wait for this relationship. And that was the start of my relationship with Ralph Schumacher.
Well, he wasn't on his own because, there's quite a lot of comments in this book from various different people. Jacques Villeneuve, who thawed with you eventually, but first thing he says to you when you signed up to drive with him, he looks like he should be in a boy band. I mean, for a male-dominated sport, Jenson, from the outside, it can look pretty bitchy.
Yeah, it can, and it is. I think it's probably less so these days, but it definitely was then. And that's the thing, I'm very open in the book. I say exactly how it was. And, pretty much everyone that you say bitchy, all the people that I've mentioned the bitchiness, I'm friends with now. So it's fine, I think. We'll see. But it was. And I think in
What's
I think in every sport, though, when you're at the top, there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of pressure as well. And, Jacques Villeneuve was the world champion in 97. This was in 2003, we were teammates. And it was his team, he had his own team around him. And I was this young kid that he said, from a boy band coming in and spoiling the atmosphere, I guess, for him. But after a few races, we got on really well. And now we're friends. I see him in the paddock in Formula One. And I really like Jacques. He's very outspoken, which is what I really like about Jacques.
And what about Lewis Hamilton, your partner at McLaren? Did you have that kind of relationship with him? How did that differ? Because you've had a lot of teammates.
Yeah, I have had a lot of teammates. You get that when you've been racing for so long.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I left Brawn for McLaren, and it was for many reasons. I needed a new challenge. I remember winning the world championship with Brawn that evening. I was in my hotel room on my own for a couple of hours, just thinking, I don't know how I'm supposed to act right now. I'm a world champion. I've set out to be a world champion. I've achieved it. What do I do now? I haven't planned for this. So for me, to go and challenge Lewis was the next exciting challenge, and to race in a team that he had built over the years. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. So walking in, I was very nervous because I thought, this team is based around Lewis. But the team said to me, just so you know, this isn't Lewis's team. He drives for us as you will. I was like, okay. And it was an interesting relationship because we're both very competitive. We were the last two world champions. We were both British, racing for McLaren, a team that has so much history in the sport. There was a lot of pressure on us to succeed and to beat the other one. And you're always going to have difficult days between teammates because you're both going for the same bit of circuit.
Your biggest competitor is your teammate.
Yeah, exactly. He's the first guy you got to beat. And when you beat Lewis Hamilton, you're pretty much going to win the race. He's such a fierce competitor and the quickest guy over one lap that Formula One's ever seen, I think. So he was a tough competitor, and I loved beating him. It didn't happen as much as I would have liked, but it did happen. And with a teammate, you're always looking for a weakness. And he didn't have many when it came to driving, but out of the car he did, and you work on those weaknesses, and that's exactly what you do as a racer. Everyone does the same. And sometimes we definitely had issues because he thought I was doing something malicious, which I wasn't. For example, we raced in Turkey and I overtook him when he was told I'm not going to overtake him. I did. He overtook me again. He won the race. I finished second. And I remember on the podium he looked at me and shook his head. I was like, what's the matter with him? And I spoke to him. I said, what's the matter? He said, you overtook me. You weren't supposed to. I said, well, nobody told me. I said, I wasn't given the order to not overtake you. And then, obviously, he thought, well, the team didn't tell him because they wanted him to win. So there was so much emotion involved. And I think it's always the same.
And insecurity.
Yeah, and which is surprising because he's got so much natural ability. But I think we all do have those insecurities. And yeah, it's a very emotional sport, Formula One, which you probably wouldn't see from the outside. And as drivers, we try not to show it because we don't want to show a weakness.
There was a spectacular win in Canada in 2011. Some people say, well, in fact, a lot of people say the best Formula One race of all time. You came from the very back to win that race. I know winning the World Championship is the high point, but that's got to come a pretty close second, right?
I wasn't last just once either.
No, yeah.
I was last twice.
You had a crash.
Yeah, I started sixth. I crashed with Lewis. It was red flagged. I crashed with Fernando. I got a drive-through penalty. I had 5 pit stops. I'd broken front wing. I had to pit 4 as well. I was last twice, and I won on the last lap of the race. I didn't lead a lap. I led half a lap of that race, but it was the right half a lap of the race.
And it was chucking it.
It was chucking it down for a big part of the race. But yeah, I mean, everything went wrong in that race. And I think it just shows you, however tough or it is in a Grand Prix, you got to keep your head, stay focused, because it can all turn right, and it did. It was a shock, I think, to a lot of people that we came away with that victory. But yeah, one of my most special memories of F1.
Well, talked about the people that it was a bit awkward with, although you are friends with Jack now. The people that it's been great with for you, you really get a sense of your friendship with David Coulthard in this book. And there's one story which I've got to say, you've got to tell it because it's just great. So what happened? You had a few bevies, and then what?
Well, this is, I mean, narrow it down. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
with DC, there's so many stories.
Yeah, about bevies. Okay, well, the time that he probably could have ended his career with
Okay.
a very bad decision, which
Yes.
you stopped.
Yes, well, DC had a boat. This is probably about 10 years ago now. And we took it from Monaco down to Corsica. And then we're going to go on to Sardinia. Anyway, sat on the front of the boat for however many hours it takes, 4 hours, drinking Bloody Marys. Didn't realise by the time we didn't realise until we got there that we were as red as a Bloody Mary from the sun. And kept drinking and ended up going out on the town, having a few drinks and dinner and what have you. Go back to the boat, and there were 15, 20 maybe paparazzi outside the boat. So we went on the boat, and DC, you know, the excitable DC, he's like, I'm going to give him a show. So he starts stripping off, and he gets down to his pants. I'm like, okay, far enough, DC. And then he takes his pants off as well. I'm like, oh, wow. First of all, wow. And what you're about to do, wow. And he's running towards the back of the boat, and you've got the glass door at the back of the boat, which has got a curtain over it. He's running towards it, and he's just about to pull back the curtain. He's like, I'll give him a show. Just about to pull it back, and I rugby tackled him to the floor, which is also quite an interesting, position that we found ourselves in on the floor. But I definitely saved him from making one of the biggest mistakes of his life.
What did he say to you in the morning?
Thank you. Yes, with a very sore head. But no, it was a good memory. Yeah.
I know we're skipping about a bit here, but I'm just trying to sort of think of the things that have really formed you, and you do get an idea of them in the book. The people that you've worked with, not least of all your dad, of course, but the teams that you've been on. Flavio Pretorius, that was quite an important influence in a lot of ways, because you were with Williams, you moved to Benetton, and things started badly from the get-go, and he called you a lazy playboy in the press.
Yeah.
And you were really not prepared for that, or indeed for how that affected you.
Yeah, I was 21, and I was having a really difficult year anyway. It was, we were unreliable, we were slow, but I was also off the pace compared to Fisichella, who's sort of well known for being a very good driver in a bad car, and I wasn't, and I couldn't drive around it, and that's when I realised, talent will only get you so far, and you've really got to work hard to work on your weaknesses. But it took him saying that to make me realise.
He did have a yacht, though.
I know he did. Yeah, I know he did, and the biggest playboy of all. Oh, I did have a yacht.
Oh, yeah, you both did. Yeah, everybody's got a yacht, haven't they? So it's part of the course. But, there is a certain amount of it that you will admit to in terms of you did fling your money around a bit.
Yeah, well, I spent money that I didn't have, which I think a lot of people do, but it was obviously on quite a big scale. But it was, I made a lot of mistakes in my early career, and it could have ended the dream very early. And he was very aggressive with his words, but in a way, it helped me. It definitely hardened me up and made me stronger to get over those words. That because he didn't even say it to me face to face; it was in the press, which made it difficult. But I see Flavio now and again in Monaco, and we get on well. We'll have a drink together. But yeah, it was really, really difficult. He was a tough guy. I mean, he'd achieved a lot in the sport with Michael Schumacher, but if you weren't quite up to what he expected of you, he was very outspoken, But it helped me. It made me work really, really hard, and that's made me the driver that I am today. So.
What about Michael Schumacher? How much of a relationship did you have with him? Because he is probably the reason that I first started to really get into Formula One.
Yeah.
I was absolutely a huge fan of his early career, well, of his whole career, but that's what kicked me off into the sport. How were you with him? What was he like for you? Was he one of the great competitors?
Yeah, I mean, in the sort of 2004 to 2006 sort of time when Ferrari were very strong, he was obviously the guy to beat. And, I watched him when I was 13 years old clinch a world championship. And then I was racing with him. He was the guy that, he wasn't a hero, but the guy I definitely looked up to. You would want to be Michael Schumacher.
Why wasn't he a hero?
For me it was Alain, because he was
Prost.
very different personality, very calm, the professor as he's called, and I like the way he went racing. But Michael was the young kid coming in and destroying everyone. It was good to see. It really was. It was something very fresh for the sport. And then in 2000, when I got my drive in Melbourne, first race of the year, I remember driving out the pit lane and he was the guy in front of me. In his Ferrari, the V10 sound. And it was just one of those moments, we're driving out the pit lane and all the leaves have fallen because of the time of the year of the race. So he had this rooster tail of leaves coming out the back of his Ferrari V10. And I had the biggest smile on my face. This is a dream come true. And through the years, we weren't always, fighting because he was in a Ferrari that was a lot stronger than most of the cars. But a few races we did fight, and I loved racing with Michael. It was a real challenge. But for me, he was always fair. He was tough guy to fight with and tough guy to overtake. But he was always fair with me. I know he hasn't been with people like Jacques and Damon Hill in the past. And it's crazy that I was racing with Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill racing with Michael Schumacher. You know what I mean? He's such a guy that raced for so many years in the sport and achieved from start to finish as well. It's fantastic to see. And, for him to, have the injuries that he's got from skiing is so sad after such a career in motorsport, and a career that's dangerous. Formula One's dangerous, and he walks away, goes skiing with his son, and gets a big impact to the head, and it's so sad to hear.
And nobody knows how he is.
No, it's very difficult to find out. I don't know either, but I can understand. The family, they want to be private. Their whole life has been in front of the TV and in the media. I'm sure at this point in time, they want everything to be private, and you have to give them that.
And that's what you're enjoying now. You're enjoying a bit of privacy, apart from obviously the book and everything that's going to come with that. What might you do next season? Because you're keen to still compete in motorsport. I know you want to do Le Mans. What else are you into?
Next year, I don't think it's the right time for me to be doing Le Mans. It's in an unusual place, Le Mans, because the top category, there's, you don't have the manufacturers like you've had the last couple of years. For me next year, I have a big love for Japan, and I've worked with Honda for so many years. I want to race in Japan. There's a category called Super GT, which I would like to race in, and nothing's certain yet, but that's probably where I'm going to be. It's an 8-race series, endurance series, which really gave me the love for motorsport back. I raced in August in Super GT for the Mugen team, and absolutely loved it. The team atmosphere, and it's funny with endurance racing because you've got 3 or 2 drivers in the same car. So that one gets out, you get in. So you spend the whole time working with that driver to improve your car. He's not your competitor. He's your teammate. He's part of you.
It's the polar opposite of what you've been doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Normally, you work with your teammate and then you go out and you have to beat him. Whereas with endurance racing, it's the complete opposite, which I loved. It was such a nice atmosphere and really enjoyable to be part of that team.
And presumably you were staying in your favourite hotel in the world while you were there.
Which one?
The
Grand Hyatt.
Yeah, in Tokyo.
No, it's a long way from there.
So it's a long way from there.
Suzuka is its own world.
You always used to pay for your own hotels, which I found very interesting. Because presumably you can get them to do whatever you want. But why did you want to maintain that kind of level of apartness?
Yeah, well, To be fair, I mean, some drivers have it in their contract that their travel's paid for. For some reason, I never did. And McLaren never did either, so I always paid for my travel. But it was cool. I could decide where I wanted to stay, which was always nice.
So apart from triathlons and apart from the racing, what else have you got planned over the next couple of years? Because it sounds to me very much like there's going to be ringing of wedding bells, pitter-patter of tiny feet, all of that stuff, because you have to fit that in somewhere too.
I do, but I don't have a time scale. I'm very happy at the moment, unbelievably happy actually, and really enjoying the next chapter of my life.
And you never miss F1?
No, I miss driving, I miss racing, but I don't miss F1. I've done my time, and I loved it for most of my career, but there's so much out there. I'm not just a Formula 1 driver, I'm a racing driver, so I will race in many things over the years, and yes, I would love to do Le Mans. 24-hour race is just madness, so that's something I'm going to aim for in the future.